Welcome, dear friend. Tonight, let us begin in the hush of early morning, long before the world stirs awake.
We'll walk through the dusty paths of a quiet Galilean village and witness how the day slowly begins. Let your mind wander, your breath soften, and your body rest as we drift into a slower world. The morning in a first-century Galilean village unfolds slowly, like a scroll being unrolled at dawn. Before the sun reaches the rim of the surrounding hills, the village breathes in shadows. It is not a dramatic awakening. There are no sharp alarms or bustling horns. Instead, the world stirs gently, with the softened footsteps of women rising before the rest of the household. A faint breeze moves through the rough linen curtains hanging from the single entrance of a modest home. This house, like most in the village, is simple. Walls of sun-dried clay bricks, a flat roof of mud and straw, and floors dusted with earth. The scent of ash lingers faintly in the corners from the fire that died during the night, and the embers still hold the ghost of warmth in the small hearth against the eastern wall. One woman, middle-aged, with her head covered in a cloth folded twice and tied loosely, moves slowly toward the stone pitcher placed near the door. The pot is cool to the touch, drawn the night before from the communal cistern. She dips a hand into it, rinsing her fingers in the quietest of splashes. Her motions are not hurried. There is time. There is always time at this hour. She pours a small amount into a clay basin, sets it on the ground, and bends to wash her face, letting the water fall silently onto the hard-packed floor. From the roof above, the family's younger daughter, perhaps 10, stretches on her mat. She had slept outdoors under a blanket of coarse wool, tucked near the short wall that surrounds the rooftop. It is the cool season, but not cold. Her breath curls into the air briefly as she sits up and hugs her knees, watching the sky shift from black to deep navy, then to soft lilac. The first birds are beginning to call, a sound so familiar it doesn't wake anyone. It simply belongs. In the courtyard, a rooster gives an uncertain cry, as if unsure whether it is yet his moment. A neighboring house replies with a soft murmur. Someone else has risen. Perhaps a man gathering his cloak before stepping out to relieve himself at the edge of the garden. The world is still mostly asleep, but waking is underway, quietly, carefully, as it has for generations. Inside the home, a boy stirs on the floor mat. He shares the space with his brothers, all curled like commas beneath woven blankets. Their heads are pressed against thin pillows filled with straw and fabric scraps. The eldest rises first, rubbing his face with the edge of his sleeve. He moves to the door and pulls it open slowly. The hinges creak, a tiny, tired sound. Outside, the village path is visible now. The mist lifts in threads from the stone-paved street. A goat tied to a peg snorts and adjusts its weight. Far in the distance, over the hills, the first amber stroke of sun reaches skyward. At the edge of the village, fishermen have begun their descent toward the lake. They carry nets coiled over their shoulders like sleeping serpents. The nets are heavy with the scent of brine and twine. The walk to the shore takes time, but there is no urgency. The fish will be there, or they will not. It is not for the fishermen to decide. Back in the house, the woman kneels beside the hearth. She places 3 fingers on the ash, searching for warmth. Finding a faint glow, she feeds the coals with straw and dry twigs. A spark catches. The fire responds gently, grateful for the invitation. She sets a small clay pot over the heat, filled with water and crushed barley. Breakfast is simple, always simple. The smell of warming grain fills the room slowly. The children begin to rise. They move without speaking. No one rushes. The day will be long and full of labor, but the start is sacred. In this hour, time expands like dough set to rise. One of the boys opens the wooden shutter over the small window. The outside world enters as filtered light. The olive tree in the courtyard catches the sun's earliest glow. each leaf haloed in gold. A lizard stirs on the wall. The family eats together, seated on woven mats around a low table. The food is passed without words. A handful of olives, a torn piece of bread. The barley porridge, now warm and thick, is shared from a central bowl. A fig is halved with a dull knife and offered to the youngest child, who accepts it with wide eyes. The father, his face lined from years of sun and stone, chews thoughtfully. He glances out the window toward the field beyond. Soon it will be time to go, but not yet. For now, they eat. For now, they breathe the morning together. And as the sun finally crests the low ridge to the east, spilling honeyed light over rooftops and clay ovens, the village comes fully awake, but never abruptly. The day has begun, and it has begun gently. Thank you for joining this gentle journey through the start of a simple day. The morning has softened into late dawn, and the village is fully awake. The last traces of shadow retreat as sunbeams stretch across the narrow paths and stone homes. In Galilee there is no morning rush, no clamor of city bells or distant carts. Instead, the day continues with the steady rhythm of earth and labor. In a modest home nestled near the edge of the village, a man ties a cloth around his waist and places a hand-woven sack over his shoulder. In it are simple tools: a small sickle with a wooden handle, a bundle of cords for binding sheaves, and a skin of water. He steps outside, squinting at the sky. It will be a warm day. Beyond the last row of homes, the land opens into rolling hills and terraced plots. The soil here is rocky but resilient. Centuries of hands have tilled it, turned it, and trusted it. The man walks slowly, with the gait of one who knows the terrain. Every stone, every path edge is familiar. He greets another farmer with a nod and a quiet shalom. No conversation is necessary. Their work speaks in silence. At a nearby plot, a woman bends to loosen weeds from between rows of barley. Her fingers are quick but careful. She pauses now and then to examine the earth, checking its moisture, feeling its texture. Her headscarf has slipped slightly, revealing strands of gray. She does not fix it. It is not important. Children run along the edges of the fields, laughing quietly as they chase a goat that has wandered too far from its post. Their sandals kick up small clouds of dust that settle as quickly as they rise. To the west of the fields, the land begins to slope into pastures where flocks are led. A shepherd, tall and silent, moves slowly among his sheep. He carries a staff worn smooth by years of use. The flock responds not to his voice, but to the sound of his steps, the rhythm of his presence. He does not drive them. He walks, and they follow. The sheep graze in scattered clusters, pulling at the sparse grass and flowering weeds. Every few minutes, the shepherd pauses to scan the hills, not in fear, but in habit. He watches the clouds, listens for birds, notes where the grass thickens. This, too, is part of the work. A younger boy follows behind, carrying a skin of water and a pouch of dates for their midday meal. He steps with exaggerated care, trying to match the pace of the older man. It is his first year joining the full day's walk, and the weight of it is settling into his shoulders. Back in the fields, another farmer inspects the olive trees lining the path. He checks the leaves for signs of wear or worms, lifts a branch to examine the forming fruit. It is not yet the season for harvest, but every day offers a clue for those who look closely. The sun climbs higher, and the breeze fades. The sounds of birds are replaced by the steady rustle of grain stalks brushing one another, and the distant bleat of a lamb searching for its mother. In one of the larger plots, 3 men work in tandem. One drives a wooden plow pulled by a donkey. Another follows behind, breaking clumps of soil with a hoe. The third scatters seed in slow, wide gestures, his fingers spreading out like a fan. They do not speak. The task is known, the pace instinctive. Occasionally one pauses to wipe his brow with a scrap of cloth, glances at the sun, and nods to the others. It is a rhythm older than language. Near the outer pasture, two shepherds meet briefly. They share a few words, exchange a handful of figs and almonds, and part ways. Their sheep intermingle briefly before parting again, as if echoing their shepherd's mutual understanding. At the edge of the pasture, a narrow stream runs slowly between two groves. Its surface glints like glass in the light. A few sheep kneel to drink. The shepherd fills a wooden bowl and places it on the ground for the younger ones. The water is cool and clear, fed by springs that have served this land longer than memory. He sits on a flat stone, unrolls a strip of cloth, and eats a piece of bread. He chews slowly, eyes on the hills. He is not watching for anything in particular. He is simply present. Further down the trail, a group of women gather at the footpath carrying empty baskets. They're headed to glean the edges of a vineyard, permitted by custom to the poor and widows. They talk softly among themselves, adjusting the folds of their garments and balancing the weight of the sun on their backs. Their laughter is gentle, and their walk unhurried. Meanwhile, the shepherd rises, dusts off his tunic, and whistles softly. The sheep turn slowly, almost reluctantly, and begin moving toward the next grazing patch. The boy trails behind, picking up stray tufts of wool caught on brambles. As the day reaches its zenith, the light turns bright and still. Even the insects seem to hum lower, and so the work continues, not urgent, not effortless, but certain. The fields stretch out in quiet testimony to the hands that tend them, and the flocks echo the patience of those who guide them. This is the middle part of the day, not dramatic, not storied, but full of labor, of land, of listening. And in the folds of the hills and the furrows of the earth, the life of Galilee continues, one humble task at a time. As the sun reaches its peak above the hills of Galilee, the village begins to exhale. The brilliance of midday is both harsh and holy. The shadows, once long and soft in the early hours, now shrink into crisp outlines beneath trees and rooftops. The air thickens. Time slows. In the fields, farmers pause, not abruptly, but as though in silent agreement with the sun. A man leans on his hoe, adjusts the scarf around his neck, and begins the walk homeward. His feet leave a faint trail in the warm dust, each step measured. He carries no urgency. Noon invites stillness. Women gather their tools and baskets. Some balance jugs of water on their heads, their backs straight, their arms loose. The pottery sings with each sway. Faint clinks against their earrings or the beaded ties of their tunics. Their sandals, dusted white from the soil, scuff quietly along the stone paths that snake between homes. At the village center, the homes absorb the heat of the sun. Clay walls glow in earthy tones, ochre, sienna, dusty rose. Wooden doors stand slightly ajar, inviting any wisp of breeze that might pass through. Inside one home, a young woman crouches by the hearth. The fire is down to glowing coals. She stirs a pot gently, her wooden spoon moving in a patient circle. The scent of lentils and coriander drifts upward, carried by the currents of warmth that rise from the clay floor. Across the courtyard, in the shade of an olive tree, a boy sets out a cloth. It is worn but clean, patterned with faded indigo squares. He places it with care on the ground and arranges earthen bowls, olives, figs, a wedge of soft cheese wrapped in leaves. A round loaf of barley bread rests in the center, its crust dark from the morning's fire. The family gathers slowly. A father returns from the field, brushing soil from his knees. A mother settles beside the youngest child, adjusting the child's tunic to protect her from the sun. No one speaks loudly. Voices are hushed, not by rule, but by the sacred quiet of the hour. They sit on mats made of reeds and cloth scraps. The meal is not grand, but it is whole. Hands reach, not with greed, but with gentle familiarity. Bread is torn, not sliced. Each person dips from the shared bowls. There is rhythm here, too, a choreography of simplicity and gratitude. Somewhere down the lane, a child laughs, then quickly quiets. A dog pants in the shade. Bees drone lazily around a fig tree, their hum blending into the stillness. As the food is eaten, the conversation is sparse. A few words about the weather, a remark about a neighbor's sick donkey, a blessing whispered under the breath. The meal itself does most of the talking, its warmth, its texture, its provision. Once the food is gone, the cloth is gently shaken out. Crumbs scatter like tiny seeds on the packed dirt. Bowls are returned to a basin by the wall, waiting to be rinsed when the heat eases. Then a shift. One by one, the family settles into rest. Mats are unrolled again, this time not for sleep's deep night embrace, but for a shorter, softer kind of stillness. The midday rest. A woman reclines near the doorway, her back against a wall that hums with the sun's touch. She fans herself with a strip of palm leaf. Her eyes are half closed, not quite asleep, not fully awake. She listens to the quiet, the occasional coo of a dove, the creak of wood as the roof settles in the heat. Children lie side by side, limbs sprawled like sun-warmed cats. One murmurs in his sleep, dreaming perhaps of goats or running or figs too high to reach. In a shaded room, an elderly man sits beside a low window. He watches the dust dance in the air and strokes his beard slowly. In his lap is a fragment of scroll, psalms written in careful hand. He does not read aloud, the words live within him. Outside, the village is hushed. A few birds call, a breeze flutters a curtain, but mostly there is pause, even the animals sense it. A donkey rests its head against a post, eyes closed, tail still. This is the hour when time bends. It is not wasted, it is honored. The labor of the morning is digested. The weariness of the body is tended with silence. In homes across Galilee, this rhythm repeats. Eat, rest. Watch the light shift. Let the soul breathe. And in that sacred pause between labor and labor, the people remember what it is to simply be, not to strive, not to build, but to belong to the day as it passes, gently, toward the cooler hours. As the sun begins its slow descent, stretching golden light over rooftops and fields, the village begins to stir once more. The midday rest has passed, and now the second rhythm of the day takes hold, a quieter hum of trade and handiwork. In the small market square at the village center, a few wooden stalls sit shaded beneath canvas tarps strung between trees and stone walls. They are not grand, not elaborate. Their tables are hewn from local timber, their baskets woven from reeds that line the nearby stream. Here, commerce is not frantic, but familiar. A man sets out a crate of clay oil lamps, each one molded by hand and dried under the sun. Their shapes vary slightly, some round, others more oblong, but each bears the maker's mark, a single pressed thumbprint near the spout. He arranges them with care, brushing away dust with a frayed cloth. Next to him, a woman unfurls a strip of linen dyed in earthy tones. She has spent the last week working it through stages of soaking, drying, and beating until it's softened to her liking. Beside the cloth, she lays out small bundles of wool thread, some undyed, others tinged with pomegranate or indigo. A group of children sits nearby, weaving rush mats under the supervision of an elder. Their fingers move deftly, slipping the fibers over and under in practiced rhythm. It is not punishment nor idle play. It is participation, a quiet apprenticeship into the work of hands. From another stall wafts the scent of dried herbs, thyme, hyssop, rosemary, and mint. Small bunches hang in neat rows, and shallow bowls hold spices crushed into coarse powder. A merchant slowly lifts a scoop of cumin and lets it fall in a gentle stream back into the bowl, releasing a burst of aroma into the air. A potter, seated cross-legged on a low stool, turns a small lump of clay on his wheel. His hands are wet, his brow damp. Around him sit finished pieces, bowls, pitchers, and jars, still dark from the last firing. He does not look up as people pass. His work is slow, methodical, and absorbing. To one side of the square, a carpenter works beneath a canopy of olive branches. He does not saw or hammer loudly. Instead, he smooths a length of cedar wood with a curved plane. The shavings curl like ribbons and fall at his feet. On a low bench beside him rests a half-finished stool, its legs neatly joined with dowels, awaiting sanding. Women move among the stalls, inspecting goods with discerning eyes. They run fingers along woven baskets, gently test the weight of ceramic jars, and nod in approval or step away without a word. Transactions are simple: a jar of oil for 2 measures of barley, a woven mat for a pair of sandals. Coins change hands occasionally, but bartering is the heartbeat of this market. Not far from the stalls, a young woman sits on a stone bench, spinning wool with a drop spindle. The wool twists into thread between her fingers, pulled slowly from a bundle at her side. She hums softly, no tune in particular, just a thread of sound to match the motion. In a shaded corner, 2 elderly men sit playing a quiet game of strategy with stones on a flat board scratched into the dirt. Their moves are slow, punctuated by long pauses. A few children crouch nearby, watching in silence, learning not just the rules but the etiquette of patience. A baker, finished with the morning's loaves, walks through the square with a basket of hard biscuits, sweetened with fig paste. They are offered as treats or taken home to soften in water or wine. He exchanges a biscuit for a spindle of thread, a quiet trade made with a nod. Above the square, birds settle on rooftops and coo from under eaves. Their wings catch the light as they flit between buildings. A few goats bleat from the edge of the village, their tethers tangled gently in tufts of grass. As the afternoon lengthens, the market begins to wane. Stalls are tidied, unsold goods packed into baskets or covered with cloths. The potter sets his tools aside and carefully transfers his newly formed bowl to a drying shelf. The carpenter sweeps the wood shavings into a pile and sits back with a deep, satisfied sigh. Craftspeople retreat into their homes or shaded workshops, where the light lingers longer on walls and workbenches. There they continue quietly, mending, shaping, braiding, or carving. The sounds are soft: the scrape of a knife, the pull of a thread, the gentle creak of wood. In one home, a mother shows her daughter how to mend a tunic. She threads the needle and demonstrates the small, even stitches needed to close a worn seam. The daughter mirrors her movements, tongue between her teeth in focus. It is not perfection that matters, but the passing on of hands-on knowledge. The marketplace is empty now, save for a few footprints and scattered straw. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers across the ground. This time of day does not shout, it murmurs. And in that murmur, the village continues to make and mend, shaping the world with hands and patience. This is the quiet commerce of life, not driven by excess, not rushed by urgency. It is the humble art of sustaining a community through steady work and thoughtful exchange. And as the day prepares to close, the tools are set aside, not with weariness, but with gratitude for what was made, shared, and learned. The sun has begun its slow descent behind the western hills, bathing the village in a golden hue that melts gently into twilight. It is the kind of light that seems to hush everything it touches. Children's laughter fades into murmurs. The sounds of work soften. The birds, so lively during the midday lull, grow still. Evening has come. The houses, built from sun-dried brick and stone, are tinged with warm amber. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys and rooftop vents, a fragrant trail from the hearth fires being stirred back to life. It is a signal, not just of warmth and nourishment, but of rhythm, a beckoning to come in from the fields, to return from the markets, to draw close to home. One by one, families gather, shoes are left by the door, hands are rinsed in bowls of water, and garments are dusted off with practiced grace. The breeze that enters each doorway carries the scent of wood smoke, herbs, and earth, mingling with the cool breath of approaching night. In a modest home with low wooden beams, a woman kneels by the hearth, adjusting a clay pot suspended above a bed of glowing embers. The pot contains a simple stew, lentils, garlic, and leeks, simmering slowly. Beside her, her daughter slices figs and places them into a small dish. The sounds of evening are gentle, the crackle of firewood, the soft bubbling of broth, the muffled laughter of siblings reunited at the end of the day. A man enters, placing his tools in a corner, shaking dust from his tunic. He kneels to greet his children, ruffling their hair, sharing a wordless smile with his wife. He washes his face with water poured from a jug and dries it with a cloth worn soft by many evenings like this one. Soon dinner is served on a low table surrounded by woven mats. The family sits cross-legged or reclined slightly, their bodies still weary from the day's labor, but now allowed to rest. The father breaks bread and offers a quiet blessing. It is not elaborate, just a few words of thanks to the God who gave the day and now gives its closing. They eat slowly, savoring not only the food, but the comfort of each other's company. Bowls are passed with murmured offers. A child spills a bit of broth and laughs. The mother wipes it up without a word. These are not distractions. They are part of the ritual. Outside, a neighbor lights a small oil lamp and places it in a niche by the door. Its flame flickers gently, casting soft circles of light on the wall. It is both illumination and invitation. If a traveler were passing, he would know the home is at peace. Further down the lane, an elderly couple shares their meal by candlelight. They eat in near silence, occasionally nodding to each other, as though to say, "We are still here. We are still provided for." After the meal, dishes are rinsed in a shallow basin, and the table cleared with slow, grateful movements. The children begin to settle, some lying on mats, others leaning against parents, their eyelids heavy with the day's memory. But the evening is not quite done. In the corner of the room, a scroll is retrieved. It is unrolled with reverence. The father reads softly, a psalm or a proverb, his voice low and steady. The children may not understand every word, but the cadence is familiar. The word is not rushed, it is absorbed. Afterward, prayers are offered. Each person speaks a line, a need, a thanksgiving, a whispered hope. Even the smallest child contributes, her voice a faint echo in the still room. Then the room grows quiet again. An older sibling plays a soft tune on a shepherd's flute, its notes rising like smoke. Outside, a neighbor hums a lullaby while rocking her baby beneath a star-pricked sky. The village itself seems to sigh. A final water jug is poured out. A gate creaks closed, the last goat bleats, and the oil lamps flicker in unison across homes, tiny flames against the growing dark. Some men gather briefly outside near a fig tree, sharing stories from their youth, jokes too worn to be new, but still welcome. They speak softly, leaning on staffs, watching the stars blink awake. Women sit in doorways, mending garments by lamplight, fingers nimble, even as the world grows dim. They talk in low tones of births, of harvests, of neighbors long gone and children growing fast. And in all of it, there is peace, not silence, but peace, the sound of life winding down, of hearts coming to stillness. As night deepens, shutters are drawn. Mats are unrolled once more, this time for the long rest. Blankets of wool or linen are pulled up, and bodies sink into their places. Some sleep quickly, others lie still, watching the flicker of the last lamp against the ceiling. A mother kisses her child's forehead and whispers a blessing. A man places his hand over his chest and breathes a final prayer. A widow clutches a clay figurine given to her long ago, now smooth from years of holding. Outside, the stars shine brighter. The moon, if it rises, casts its silver light over rooftops and olive trees. The village sleeps, not all at once, not on command, but gradually, like a song that slows and fades. This is the closing of the day, the ritual of return, of nourishment, of reflection, of gentle letting go. And so Galilee sleeps, wrapped not in luxury, but in rhythm, in tradition, in the quiet echo of evening rituals that have endured for generations. With darkness gently cloaking the hills of Galilee, and the final embers of the evening fire fading into soft ash, the village settles into its night rhythm, not of silence, but of softened sound and tender storytelling. A breeze wanders through the narrow paths between homes, rustling fig leaves and stirring faint dust. Olive branches sway above rooftops like slow dancers in the moonlight. Though the village sleeps, not all do so at once. There are still pockets of wakefulness, slow-moving like twilight shadows, unhurried and observant. In one home, the family gathers for a final act of the day. The evening meal is long finished, the prayer spoken, and the oil lamp trimmed low. But before sleep claims them, there is time still for words, stories passed from memory, embroidered with patience, steeped in the comfort of repetition. A father leans against a wall, his voice barely above a whisper. Around him children curl on mats, their eyes heavy but open. He tells them of a shepherd long ago who wandered too far into the hills and learned to listen for the voice of God in the rustling wind. The tale isn't told with drama, but with slow pauses, each word measured like a step on sacred ground. Elsewhere, a grandmother draws her shawl around her shoulders, sitting at the threshold of her home. A girl leans against her, eyes wide, as the elder recalls her own childhood, how the olive harvests once lasted until moonrise, and how songs were sung from rooftop to mark the year's end. The girl does not interrupt. She listens not just with her ears, but with her breath. From another doorway, a soft melody rises. An older brother hums while plucking the string of a lyre. The tune is simple, as old as the hills, repeating itself like the stars in their courses. A few neighbors nearby pause to listen before continuing their quiet tasks. It's not performance, it's presence. Night in the village is not devoid of life. It is simply slowed. A baby stirs and is hushed by a mother's lullaby, murmured in half-spoken phrases, half-hummed verses. A goat shuffles in its pen, bumping gently against a wooden post. The sound of water dripping into a clay basin echoes with soft finality. Above, the stars blaze silently. Galilee's sky, unburdened by the lamps of modernity, glows with the full witness of the heavens. Constellations rest above the rooftops, telling their own tales to those who still look up. Inside homes, flickers of storytelling continue, slow spirals of history and heritage. An uncle recounts the time he traveled beyond the Sea of Galilee to trade wool in Tyre. He describes the markets, the foods, the language of gestures. His nephew listens, not for the climax, but for the cadence. A midwife sits with a pregnant neighbor sharing the quiet folklore passed from woman to woman, how rosemary planted near the door brings peace, or how the cries of owls might signal rain. These stories do not require belief. They require attention. And between these tales, the village speaks in other ways. The wooden beam of a door creaks under the night's coolness. A chicken rustles in its perch. The soft footsteps of a night watcher, an elder who still walks the paths after dark, echo slowly between walls. His staff clicks lightly with each step, and now and then he stops simply to listen. In some homes, dreams begin to visit. The storyteller's voice has faded into breath. Children's limbs twitch, as sleep pulls them into its quiet current. A woman pulls a blanket higher on her child's shoulder and watches the rise and fall of breath like waves. Still, some stay awake, not restlessly, but reverently. A young man sits alone with a scroll, lips moving silently in reflection. His lantern glows like a second moon. He reads from the prophets, not seeking answers, but presence. Outside, the last conversations die down. One neighbor says shalom to another. A curtain falls. A dog settles into a coil at a doorstep. And then only the night remains, not silent, never silent, but softened. Crickets begin their song, 1,000 tiny instruments playing the same gentle rhythm. The wind traces the contours of rooftops. A fig drops from a tree and rolls in the dust. Somewhere far off, a jackal calls, a distant punctuation in the lullaby of Galilee. In this hour there is no urgency, no proclamation, just the sacred pause of a people rooted in rhythm, in the known, in the now. These night sounds, the whispered stories, the creaking doors, the footfalls, the breeze, they do not demand attention. They simply exist, inviting the listener to rest in their constancy. And in this quiet communion of story and sound, the village breathes and slowly, steadily, surrenders to sleep. The deepest folds of night, when even the cicadas have quieted and the last coals in the hearths glow only faintly, the village lies in a hush, so complete it feels sacred. This is the hour when dreams drift quietly through every home, like invisible visitors slipping past doorways, over sleeping limbs, into still hearts. On a straw-stuffed mat in a corner room, a woman lies curled, her breath slow and rhythmic. Her hand rests over her abdomen, her dreams shaped by memories of her childhood in another village, of her first barley harvest, of the scent of her mother's scarf. Her face, though slack with sleep, softens with the trace of a smile. In a house nearby, a boy murmurs in his dreams, legs twitching as he imagines running after a goat that always escapes. In the dream, he never quite catches it, but he is never tired either, just endlessly chasing through golden hills that stretch forever. Not far away, an old man lies awake. He has always risen before dawn, long before roosters. Tonight is no different. He lies on his back, eyes to the rafters, lips forming a silent prayer. He does not need words. The prayer is in his waiting. And yet, while dreams linger in sleep, a change begins, a shift so slow it might go unnoticed if one weren't still enough to feel it. The wind changes first. The cool breath of morning pushes against the warmth of night, sliding beneath doorways and fluttering woven curtains. It carries the smell of dew settling on clay, on olive leaves, on woolen cloaks left outside to air. The roosters begin, not in unison, but like a chorus that finds its voice gradually. One calls in the east, near the edge of the fields. Another answers from the rooftops, and soon their cries weave through the village like a gentle alarm. The sky, once black and heavy, softens to slate gray, then a pale blue brushed with hints of rose. Stars fade one by one, not extinguished, but called home by the promise of light. The old man rises, feet touching the cold floor. He wraps himself in a shawl, steps outside. He greets the wind, the faint light, the silence. He does not speak, but his presence is a kind of greeting. He walks slowly, checking the animals, stroking a goat's back, straightening a fence post. His steps are steady, measured by years of familiarity. Inside homes, dreams begin to scatter like smoke. One child shifts and stretches. A woman blinks her eyes open and listens for the sound of morning, water being poured, fire being struck. There is no rush, only rhythm. A young man rises to light the hearth. The first crack of flame against kindling is small, almost shy. It grows slowly, as if waking too. Soon the scent of burning wood fills the room, mingling with the faint aroma of soaked grain ready to boil. The village stirs. A girl fetches water, balancing the clay jug with sleepy precision. Her brother yawns and feeds the chickens, scattering grain with more generosity than aim. A baby cries, is hushed, then fed beneath the hush of a wool blanket. In the upper house near the fig tree, a father unrolls a scroll and reads softly to himself. The sun has not yet reached the horizon, but already his thoughts reach for the sacred. He reads a psalm aloud, not loudly, just enough for the words to inhabit the room. I lie down and sleep. I wake again, because the Lord sustains me. The old woman in the corner home kneads dough she began the night before. Her hands move with memory, pressing and folding with the same cadence her mother once taught her. Her grandchild watches, eyes half-lidded, tracing patterns in the flour dust on the table. Then comes the light. It does not pour in. It seeps, golden and slow, through cracks in shutters and the woven slats of rooftops. It catches in the hair of the girl grinding grain. It glints on the surface of the water in the jug. It gilds the tops of fig trees and paints warm shadows on the earthen walls. The village is fully awake now, but gently so. There is no shouting, no clamor, only a continuation. The dreams of night become the thoughts of day. The peace of rest carries into the motion of work. And as the sun finally lifts above the far hills, Galilee breathes into its new day, not as something rushed or novel, but as something old and precious, received like bread broken slowly between friends. In this quiet dawn, there is nothing to conquer, nothing to prove, only the rhythm of waking, of working, of worshiping, and of returning again, in due time, to sleep. The morning has come, but you can stay here in stillness. Let sleep cradle you a little longer. Thank you for dreaming with me. Sleep well, dear friend.